class what is going to contain, depending on your own choice. For those who are using 6, need 6 classes, that means you are to divide by 6. For those who need 5, you divide by 5. For those who need 8, you divide by 8. The choice is yours. So after your division, the next step, you have known that each class is going to contain a specific member. Then you start from the minimum value. You start from the what? Minimum value. As we have said, our minimum value is what? 6. Now, since the minimum value is 6, you start counting from what? 6. You count 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That means the first class is going to contain from what? From 6 to what? 10. From 6 to 10. Then the next class will be, after 10 is what? 11. So the next class will start from what? 11. Then you count 5 from that 11. 11 must be included. Sometimes you students make mistake. While counting your class, you don't start with the what? Minimum value. Instead of you to include 11, that 11 must be included. Most of you just start counting 11, they'll just say 12, 13, 14, 15, which is what? Wrong. You have to include 11 itself. Is that clear? So then you count from 11, 12, 13, 14, and what? 15. That means the second class is going to contain from what? From 11 to what? To 15. Then the 10th class will begin from what? 16. Then 16 to what? 20. Then next class, 21. 21 to what? 25. Next class, 26. 26 to what? 30. What is our maximum value? 36. So we have to stop at 36. Then you move on. 31 to what? 35. To 35. But 35 is still less than what? 36. Therefore, we must reach our what? Our maximum value, which is now from 36 to what? 36 to 40. Then you stop there. So there will be a situation whereby you need 6 classes, but after your 6th class, you have not reached your maximum value. Then you have to add another class to make it what? 7. Because it must comprises of your what? It must comprises of the maximum value. Then there will also be another situation whereby you need 6 classes, but at the end of the day it stops at 5. Why? Because you have what? You have reached what? You have reached the maximum value. So you stop. Once you reach your maximum value, you what? You stop. So this is the way to create what we call a class interval. Is that clear? Yes. Then the second column on the grouped frequency table is what? Class boundary. Class what? Boundary. Now the class boundary is there to tell you the boundary of each class. Each class has its own boundaries where it must not be crossed. So, and one basic function of class boundary is that even decimal numbers can be what? Can be included. Now I stop at 10. I said a class stop at 10. Another class begins at what? 11. What will happen with 10.5, 10.6, 10.7? Where are you going to put them? You see, they are above 10 and they are not up to what? 11. They are more than 10 and less than what? 11. Greater than 10 and less than what? 11. So therefore, that is one basic function of what? Function of class boundary. Now, to know the class boundary of a particular class, what you are to do, you come to your class interval. You see how vital the class interval is. That is why I told you, once your class interval is wrong, then all other classes or all other columns will be what? Will be wrong. Now, to get your class boundary, you go back to your class mark. the class interval. This class interval comprises of two things. We have what we call the lower class interval and the what? Upper class interval. Now, you subtract 0.5 from the what? From the lower class interval and add what? 0.5 to the what? Lower class interval. Are you getting me? Like we said, the first class is from what? 6 to what? 10. Now, you subtract 0.5 from 6. That's good. You are going to have what? 5.5. Then to what? You add 0.5 to the what? Upper class interval, which is what? 10. 10 plus 0.5. You are going to have what? 10.5. So this is how to find what? This is how to find the what? The class boundary. Class what? Boundary. You subtract 0.5 from the lower class interval and what? Add what? 0.5 to the what? Upper class interval. Are you getting it? Now, the next column is the column of the what? Class mark. Now, class mark, also known as the midpoint. We call it what? Midpoint. That is the midpoint of every class. The class mark is the middle value of a class interval, or the midpoint of what? Of every class interval. How can you get your class mark? To get the class mark, you add the lower class interval and the what? Upper class interval and divide by what? Divide by 2. That is, as we have cited in our example, that the first class comprises of 6 and what? 10. 6 is the lower class interval, 10 is the what? Upper class interval. Now you add what? 6 plus what? 10, which is what? 16. 16 divided by 2, you have what? 8. Therefore, 8 is the midpoint, or 8 is the class mark. Are you getting what I'm saying? Yes. So that is how to get the class mark. So you take it step by step, finish with the first class, then you come to the second class that begins from what? 11 to what? 15. 11 plus 15 is what? 26. 26 divided by 2. 13. Is that clear? Yes. So now, and one basic thing with class or class mark or midpoint. Once you get the first two values, then the remaining one keep repeating itself. The first value we get was what? 8. The second value we get was what? 13. Now the next class that begins from what? 16 to what? 20. 16 plus 20 is what? 36 divided by 2. 18. Can you see? 8, 18. The next class, we must end with what? 3. The next class is what? 21 to 25. 21 plus 25. 46 divided by 2. 23. So you see, the first class mark end with what? 8. Second one end with what? 3. Third one end with what? 8. Fourth one end with what? 3. That is how it will continue. 8 and 3. 8 and 3. 8 and 3. And once you go out of 8 and 3, it means there is a problem with your what? With your class mark. So once you get the first two class mark, then you can easily summarize or dictate the remaining class mark. Now the next column in the grouped frequency table is what? The class limits. Every class has a what? Has a limit. Every class has a what? Limits. That is where a class starts and where it what? Ends. Like the first class, we said it starts from what? 6, from the class interval, and end at what? And end at what? 10. Therefore, the limit of this class is 6 and what? 10. That is what we refer to as what? Class limit. the limit of what? Every class. That is where a specific class and where it starts and where it what? Where it ends. That is what we refer to as what? Class limits. Then the next column is the frequency column, which I think we have talked about it in the frequency table. Number of entries of a particular event. So this time around is the number of entries of each class. Is that clear? Number of entries of what? Each class. Since each classes has been what? Has been grouped. You have grouped them instead of taking them what? Individually as in what? As in frequency table. Now the next one is what? The tally column, which the tally column is the same thing with what? With the frequency column. But the only difference between them is that in frequency columns we use numerical value, while in tally column we use what we call stroke. Isn't it? We use what we call what? Stroke. So that even a layman who cannot read can at least understand what your table is saying or what your table is talking about.